just want to speak the name of Jesus over every heart and every mind. 'Cause I know there is peace within your presence. I speak Jesus.
Just wanna speak the name of Jesus till every dark addiction starts to break, declaring there is hope and there is freedom. I speak Jesus.
Your name is power. Your name is healing. Your name is life. Break every stronghold. Shine through the shadows. Burn like a fire.
I just want to speak the name of Jesus over fear and all anxiety, to every soul held captive by depression. I speak Jesus.
'Cause your name is power. Your name is healing. Your name is life. Break every stronghold. Shine through the shadows. Burn like a fire. Shout Jesus from the mountain, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy, Jesus for my family. I speak the holy name, Jesus. Shout Jesus from the mountains, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy, and Jesus for my family. I speak the holy name, Jesus. Shout Jesus from I've been wandering through the desert and seen a cloud in forever over me, but I believe the rain is coming. Yeah, and I've been hanging on to high hope, 'cause you're the one who's making dry bones come to life. You're the light I put my trust in, and every word you said is gonna come true. You will lead me to the promised land, and everything you said is gonna happen, even though I haven't seen it yet. And I will build a boat in the sand where they say it never rains, and I will stand up in faith. I'll do anything it takes with your wind in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat in a desert place when the floods and the water starts to rise. Yeah, I'll ride the storm 'cause I got you by my side with your wind in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. You're the map and you're my compass. You help me navigate the currents under me. So take the lead and I surrender. Every word you said is gonna come true. You will lead me to the promised land. Everything you said is gonna happen, even though I haven't seen it yet. And I will build a boat in the sand where they say it never rains, and I will stand up in faith. I'll do anything it takes with your wind in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat in a desert place when the flood and the water starts to rise. Yeah, I'll ride the storm 'cause I got you by my side with your wind in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. And I will build a boat in the sand where they say it never rains, and I will stand up in faith. I'll do anything it takes with your wind in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat in a desert place when the floods and the water starts to rise. Yeah, I'll ride the storm 'cause I got you by my side with your wind in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. I'll build a boat, so let it rain.
Jesus, like we always pray, we ask for your eyes to see where you are going. We ask for feet that are eager and ready and maybe even a little impatient to follow wherever it is you're wanting to lead us, and that we would run to you. So fill us this morning. Amen. We're in the book of Matthew. If you have a Bible, you're going to want that. We're in chapter 5, just giving you a heads up. We've been studying the life and teachings of Jesus, not just studying about him, but hopefully we're learning to see and watch how it is that he lived, how he loved people, how he interacted with people, how he moved through the world. And if we've learned anything so far, it's that Jesus did not fit into other people's expectations of who he was supposed to be or what they thought he was going to be, because he wasn't just another religious teacher handing out these moral lessons or encouraging people to really be good or to be nice. The way that he lived was countercultural, it was disruptive, it was unsettling. He was threatening the status quo. People did not enjoy that. And they wanted to get rid of him. And so eventually they assassinated him. And why? Because his very presence, his way of loving people, his way of healing, his way of calling out hypocrisy was sending out these seismic shifts through the entire system that existed. The religious system, the political system, the economic system, the social order of the day, and people had one of two reactions. Some people, they ran to him. They were desperate to cling to him for what he was doing. It was to be near Jesus was the safest place they thought they could be. And others, they were desperate for this new way of life. And that's why we're here, and why 2,000 years later, we are wondering as we come together, and we're like, who is this Jesus? We want to know more. Tell us more. How do we talk about him more? This guy that lived 2,000 years ago is still turning people's lives upside down, turning my life upside down. And what if his way is still causing seismic shifts in the culture? What if our neighborhoods or our workplaces or our communities could be transformed? Not because the church is here and the church has some really good program to do outreach into a community, not by some 5-step discipleship plan, but by us actually living the way that Jesus lived. What if we, as we lived how Jesus lived, if we followed his way of living and loving other people, what if that sent ripples like an earthquake into our community? And what would happen if we really let his way, the way of Jesus, how he lived life, what if living his way became our way? And we started to try and do that. Because here's the thing, it's not going to come just by studying Jesus. When we said, Jesus, I want to know you and I want to follow you, we signed up for a movement. And today we continue the Sermon on the Mount, and we're landing in chapter 5, verse 13. Jesus looking around at those who are wanting to follow his way and saying, I want to follow you, Jesus, says, you. All of you, all of us, you who are listening to these words, you who are not seen oftentimes by other people, and I'm not talking about the religious elite, we're not talking about super Christians, he says, but us. He says you, all of you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And I don't know how this lands on you, how this might hit you. But when I first heard this, when I was a kid, when I was growing up in the church, something in me would just kind of tighten inside of me, inside of my chest. Not because of what Jesus said. That wasn't whatever hit me, but it was what was taught to me when I was growing up. Because I heard this preached a lot when I was a kid. And the message was always very clear to me. Be salt, be light, go into the world, and do it now. And what that meant exactly was, for me and my friends, was to be salt meant to be different. Being different wasn't really a character. It's not about having the right character. It wasn't about being a person of integrity or loving people. It had to do with visibility. Step 1, bring your Bible to church, and not just any Bible, but you've got to bring the biggest Bible that you can find. And so if your family had one of the heritage ones, like passed down multi-generations, and it was enormous, better. You are more spiritual, you must love God more. Step 2, make sure that sitting on the top of your books, in plain view, it had to be there, bonus points. So if anyone ever visited your house, they would see the Bible as the most important book, the most read book, and you needed to angle it in such a way so that the gold lettering would catch the light for everyone to just be dazzled by it. And step 3, if you see another Christian at school who isn't doing this, make sure they feel a little guilty about it, because obviously they are not as committed to this life of following Jesus as you are. And then you had to wear the t-shirts, because if people wouldn't read a Bible because they didn't own one, oh, heaven forbid, maybe these people would read your shirt that would have these Christian verses or slogans or sayings, and maybe it would say something clever like, Jesus, the real thing. And it had the Coca-Cola little kind of font on it. And all of this sounds very ridiculous, except that it wasn't when I was growing up. It was actually taken very seriously. We were told you always had to be on the lookout for a way to sneak Jesus into some kind of a conversation. Not because Jesus and this relationship that I have with the Son of God, not because he's present in my life, that which he is, but it was because my job is to steer a conversation toward God at every moment I can, even if it meant derailing whatever the person was actually talking about. So if someone was talking about the weekends, their plans for the weekend and what they're going to do, and maybe they're going to go see something or do something, I've got to find a way to get into that conversation and steer it towards something spiritual about God. And if they're talking about their favorite band, I need to figure out how do I pivot that into maybe my favorite band, that's some Christian band. And if all this sounds really forced or exhausting or even borderline manipulative, it was completely, 100%. I own it now. But that is what I was taught as a kid, what it meant to be salt. That's what it is. Because salt isn't about, because I don't think that's really not what Jesus was teaching here. Because salt isn't primarily about standing out. Oh, okay, so now let me skip to page 3. Exactly. That's right. Because it's not about being different for the sake of being different. It's not about the Christian t-shirts. It's not about steering a conversation feeling like I have to have some evangelistic pitch or guilt-inducing reminders how someone else should be living their faith because other people are not living their faith the way that I think they should be living their faith. But it's just you. It's just me. It's just us. Our presence, it's about our love. It's about our everyday life. And I was taught that being a Christian meant being in the world. But if you're going to be in the world, you got to be really careful. Because, and I mean like really careful, like hazmat suit careful. Because if you start to do what God is calling us to do, you got to watch out because the world might get on you. It's like we're these clean white gloves that we're putting on, and we go into this world, and the world is this big, muddy, filthy pit, and the message is this. If you stick that pure white glove into that mud, that holy glove into the world, guess what? The mud doesn't get glovey. The glove is going to get muddy. And we can't have that. Translation is, the world is a really dangerous place. Keep your distance. Don't get too involved. Don't get too messy, which, if you think about it, is a really strange thing to tell people who are supposed to be following Jesus. Because here's the thing. Jesus didn't keep his distance, ever. He touched people with leprosy. He ate with the prostitutes. And the tax collectors, you go ahead. We'll give you a second.
See what happens when you don't want to. Yeah. That couldn't have been my grandson. We love you, Lucas. Oh, fine.
Thank you. Back to our regularly scheduled program.
We're on page 4.
Page 4, we actually are. Jesus ate with prostitutes and tax collectors. Jesus got down into the dirt especially with a woman who was caught in adultery. And if anyone's ever been worried about mud, if anyone should have been worried about the mud, you'd think it would have been Jesus. And yet everywhere he went, everywhere he traveled, instead of the world contaminating him, he transformed the world around him. He transformed people's lives around him. So maybe what we need is a different analogy, because Jesus never said, you are the white gloves of the world. He said, you are the salt of the earth. In the first century, salt had a completely different function than what we think of it as today. Today, we use it as a seasoning. It's my secret weapon in the kitchen. Someone will be like, can you taste this? Can you fix this? And then they walk away, and I just put more salt in. They come back, they taste it, they're like, oh, you fixed it. What did you do? I'm like, that's a secret. So right there's my secret. It's only just salt. That's all it's ever been. Salt makes everything better. You put it on your fries, you put it on whatever it is to make the flavor stronger, to bring back the flavor. Do you know there's more salt in a McDonald's milkshake than sugar? There is more salt in it to enhance it, to bring the flavor out. But back then, it was a...
Flavor enhancer?
Is that what you had said earlier?
It enhances the flavor.
It does. But it was also a preservative. Thank you. Yes. That was the other thing. It's how you kept your food from rotting. And I almost had a slideshow of rotting food. See, I do make some good choices. They had no refrigeration back then. They had no deep freezers. They had no second deep freezers. So if you had meat and wanted it to last for more than a few days, you would rub it down with salt and pack it in, because salt had this incredible ability to draw out the moisture, which meant that bacteria would not grow in it, which meant that the meat would not decay, which meant that the meat would last longer, so then you could eat it. It didn't just protect itself from decay, it also existed to stop decay from spreading when it had started. Which means when Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth, what he is basically saying is this: you are what is going to keep this world from going bad. Your very presence of living in this world is going to preserve it, and it is my plan to stop decay. So get out there and do what it is that salt does, which is a complete different mindset than be careful, don't get dirty. Salt doesn't work unless it gets in the mess. I don't want you to panic. Nobody is saying you have to go burn your Christian t-shirts. I'm not saying that. You wear them to your joy and pleasure. Though, to be honest, a few of them should be sacrificed. But the point is this: being salty isn't about avoiding the world. It's about it being a preserving force inside the world, which raises a really uncomfortable question. What is it that we're preserving? Are we preserving the world that, the people Jesus came to love and heal and restore? Or are we more interested in preserving our own comfort, our own institutions, our own sense of religious security? What is it that we're trying to preserve? I heard a story recently that still makes me mad when I think about it. There's this youth pastor who had been serving faithfully in a church for 14 years, and he loved the kids. He loved the students. He was so good with them. He loved what he was doing. He loved being a part of the church, and eventually, though, he felt like, I feel gifted to explore new areas that God's been leading me in, and he's like, I feel a sense that maybe I'm done with youth ministry, and I need to be leading a church. And so he went to his senior pastor, said, is there a way that we can maybe do a church plant? Like, is there a way we can start a new church? We'll stay connected. We want the relationships. Is there a healthy way that we can, I'll go some distance? And we partnered together to do this. Wouldn't that be amazing that as a church we could start planting other churches? And the senior pastor's response was, well, that's great, but first you've got to sign a non-compete clause. You can't take anyone from this church, and you can't place that church within 75 miles of this building. And the youth pastor, he was just shocked, and he hesitated. And the next thing he knew, same day he's being escorted out of the building, he was fired and released that very day. 14 years of ministry immediately gone in one day, as he's just trying to share his heart and trying to find a way, how do we do this ministry? How do we do the church together? How do we follow Jesus together? And in the end, the senior pastor wasn't interested in preserving the world. He was interested in preserving his church. But before we get too self-righteous, we got to ask ourselves the exact same thing, which is, what do I care about preserving? Is it my reputation? Is it my comfort in this world? Is it my idea of what faith should look like or what a church should look like? Because if we're going to be a part of the movement of Jesus, following Jesus, the thing that turns things upside down, to be a follower of Jesus, a Christian, you have to start being brave enough. I have to continue to be brave enough to start asking some of the questions, because Jesus said, I'm betting everything on you. Not your t-shirts, not your ability to avoid sin, not your perfect church attendance. He's betting on you and me. He's betting on us. Your life, your presence in this world. Because your very presence is what is going to keep this world from rotting. There's another thing about salt. Back then, it wasn't just useful. It was incredibly valuable. Salt was so valuable that Roman soldiers oftentimes were paid in salt. And that's where we come up with the word salary, for you get a payment. It's the Latin word for salt. And cities were built around the trade of salt, the industry. Entire economies were shaped by salt. The phrase "not worth their salt" literally comes from the slave trade, because slaves oftentimes were also bought and paid for with salt. And take it with a grain of salt. It comes from kind of where it was believed that every single grain of salt could be an antidote for any poison. So if you were eating and drinking anything and you're suspicious that someone might be poisoning you, you might put a little salt inside of your food or in your drinks, just to be cautious, just to make sure that I could stop that poison, and then you would continue with your life, hopefully, and not die. So when Jesus called his followers salt, he's not just saying, hey, I've given you some purpose in your life, by following me. He's saying, it's so much more. You're of incredible worth. You are of such high value to this world. The world needs what it is that you bring. The world needs who it is that you are. You are essential. I wish I could just put that in us. So if you've ever wondered, does my life matter? Is what I'm doing? I don't really feel like I'm doing a whole lot with my life. If you've ever wondered kind of these questions that nag, that maybe you would never actually bring and speak out loud or share, but you start to wonder, maybe my role in life is too small. Maybe I'm not doing enough things that are significant with my life. If you've ever doubted whether God can really use you, whether you're even gifted, whether you have the ability, whether you're anything, Jesus is literally saying to you and to me, you are the salt of the earth. You are of incredible value. You are what preserves this world, and I'm betting everything on you. So go, get in there, and do what it is that salt does. And Jesus looks at you and at me in all of our ordinariness and our mess and the pain and the hurts of our lives and the day in and day out, trying to just make it through the day sometimes selves, and says, you're still the salt of the earth. That didn't change. It's not a matter of try to be. It's not, work really hard to do this Christian journey. Work really hard to become salt. He's like, I'm just telling you, you are. Blanket statement, you are. Which then raises the question, okay, so how do we be of great value to the world? Because now that feels really overwhelming. Like suddenly I've got to be something bigger and greater and grandiosier. More grand. Greater. How do we bring value to our town? Or the neighborhood that we're in, or our family, or where it is that we work? Maybe it's as simple as we had this mailman when I lived in Hillsborough, right before we moved here. friends with. And even when I go to Hillsboro, I still run into him. He's awesome. He's my mom's mailman now. And whenever I see him coming down the road, I go out and talk to him. And he says every year it's harder and harder to be a mailman and not get fired because he talks to more and more of the people on the route. He's been on the same route for 15 years. And he's like, I've got all these people I pray for as I go down the route, whether they come out and talk with me and pray with me or I just pray for them. He's like, I know almost all of these people. I've had conversations with almost every one of them. And he's like, so every day he drops off letters, he prays over their homes, and over time, these people have come to talk to him about faith. He's like, I'm meeting some of these people outside of my job, and we go out and we're meeting for coffee or have meals, and we're talking about life and God, and he's become this pastor to these people without ever calling himself one. He's just literally salt showing up saying, I just actually really like these people. But here's my struggle. Because what about the days, or if we're going to be honest, for many of us, the seasons where life feels too much? And we go through them. When work is hard or home is hard, relationships are hard, sometimes just having small children, keeping them alive is such a good victory. And the idea of being salt feels like yet another impossible thing that I'm not doing. And I'm supposed to add that to my list of things I'm supposed to be doing. And if I'm not doing it, I'm feeling guilty because I'm not as involved in the church or doing mission trips or going to conferences or meeting with people because I've got so much laundry. If I could just mow my grass and keep that down, that might feel like a victory. And there are days I don't want to be salt. There are days I don't have anything to give anyone, and I feel like a burned out piece of toast. I don't feel like salt. I feel sometimes if I give one more thing, I'm literally just going to disintegrate. Anyone else? Ever? Yes, thank you. And on those days when someone comes to me with a need, I'm like, buddy, I don't even know how socks work today. I just don't have it. And my inner monologue is basically, I'm so empty. You got to go somewhere else. I don't even care that I'm letting you down or failing. I'm not your guy today. And that takes me to another struggle, because in my mind, I have two versions of Christianity that both feel a little bit off. First, there's the burnout version, where being salt means doing everything. I have to go serve, I've got to fix, I've got to show up for every single event, every single need, every single invitation that people say you need to because you're the pastor. And by you being there, that validates what it is that they're doing, because now that means God must be more there, though that's just not how it works. But if we could have the pastor pray or have the pastor do this, so it becomes on me and it's up to me. And if that's the case, if that's how I live and react and do ministry, I will be ashes within 5 minutes. But then there's the spectator version where I want to sit back and I'm like, hey, it's all up to you, God. You totally got this. It's up to you. And I don't know what to do with the verse when Jesus says, Kenny, you're salt. Where is the balance in between that? But the first thing is, this isn't a command. Let that one sink. This is just a declaration. You are the salt of the earth. He doesn't say try really hard to be salty. He doesn't say work on this. He just simply lays it out. You are. Which means maybe Jesus actually believes that we are. I just got goosebumps. Maybe he actually trusts us to do what he called us to do. Jesus says in John 14, 11 and 12, says, believe me when I say that I am the Father and that my Father is in me. And it's like he gets some blank stares from his disciples. So he goes on and says, or at least believes on the evidence of the works themselves. Translation. Guys, you've seen me do these miracles. You've seen the blind healed, the water turned to wine, the bread multiplied. You know that this is real. But then he takes it to this whole nother level. He says, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. I'm like, greater things? And I remember as a kid going, what are these greater things? Interesting. Tell me more. Jesus actually believes that his followers will do greater things than he did. I don't know about you, but I struggle to believe that about myself. I struggle to believe that my tired, frustrated, overextended life is capable of doing any of that. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. Not try to be, not become worthy of it. Simply, you are. And I start to wonder, maybe the people who are the best at being salty don't even realize that they're being salt. See, we tend to, I maybe think of it more like an awards show, where you've got this announcer that stands up at the podium and says, and now the best award for the best salt of the world is, and we're all waiting, who's he going to say? And the light pans on the winner, and they act surprised, and they walk up on the stage, and they've got a prepared acceptance speech ready to go. Because they knew it. They knew how great they were. But maybe in reality, it's more like the camera would pan to this ordinary person sitting in the audience, totally confused, like, what? No. Hey, I don't, who are you talking to? What? No, that's funny. Like they're getting pranked or something. You've got the wrong guy. And the announcer would say, do you remember when your friend couldn't make rent and you helped them? Oh, that was salt. Do you remember when you sat down with your kids just to help them with their homework, even though you were exhausted and you just wanted to turn the TV on and shut down? That was salt. You remember when you took 2 extra seconds to say something kind to that cashier that you saw they were having a bad day? You didn't really know them, but you just said something encouraging. You're like, I don't even remember that. But you did. That was salt. And then I'm starting to think, but I do so little. And you feel like you should be thinking about, the whole world, but really, you're just trying to get through the day, just trying to do your job, just trying to raise your kids, just trying to make it. If that is you, you need to hear this. You are the salt of your family. You are the salt of your workplace. You are the salt of this church, and you are the salt of this community. And that is of incredible value. And you can do nothing of greater worth than to be in those places and to be who it is that you are. So rest in that, because Jesus declared it. You are the salt of the earth. Jesus, he loved the Psalms. He grew up on them. He ate them. He sang them. He prayed them. And he recited this one, Psalm 1. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. See, Jesus knew how spiritual growth works in season, which means not all the time. Some seasons we are bursting with fruit, where our prayers are answered and we're actually actively engaged in feeling like I'm connecting to God and I'm praying, and you feel like doors are opening and there's movement in your life. You're like, yes, we're changing from one chapter to another in my life. I didn't always like that first chapter, but now we're into the next chapter and I'm excited and we want to move. But then there are other seasons that are like, man, I'm just stuck in this chapter that's never going to end, this season. It's cold and gray winter and nothing seems to be growing, and you start wondering, is spring ever going to come? How do I do this whole faith with God thing? Because it right now feels empty and cold, and my prayers are not even leaving the ceiling of the building. But here's the promise. If you stay rooted, the fruit will come. See, a lot of times when I think about being salty, in my mind, I'm thinking it's got to be something big. Whether I'm going to go on a mission trip, we're going to go do outreaches, we're going to do life-changing conversations. And I get to be a part of these big things. But the promise is if you stay rooted and stay connected. Jesus never said it's the big things. He never said that. He said, even if you give a cup of cold water in my name, that is enough. Even the smallest act of love has value, even if it doesn't feel like enough. And then he gave this warning. He says, if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So how do you lose your saltiness? Because salt doesn't have an expiration. It doesn't go bad, but it can get diluted.
You leave the salt on the counter where it gets wet, and then the whole thing gets ruined.
Or does that just become a salt lick?
I mean,
When it gets too watered down, that's when it stops being useful. I wonder if in our culture, the biggest danger isn't that we'll turn our back on Jesus. What if we just get too comfortable in our lives? We keep playing it safe, just surrounding ourselves with people who agree with us, staying in places where I feel useful and appreciated. Without realizing it, our saltiness, our ability to preserve and to bring life, to have an impact, it slowly fades. Not because we've made a mistake, I'm not saying that, but because we chose what was easy over what was being faithful. I know a guy who joined a small group at his church, and within the first few meetings, he realized something. He didn't like these people. There were personalities in that group. They rubbed him raw, just kind of chafed him. Conversations frustrated him, opinions, they made him cringe. So he decided, I think I'm going to leave this group because these people are just idiots. But then something strange happened. He realized that maybe, this thought came to him, maybe the reason he was in that group, maybe it wasn't for them. Maybe it was actually for him. Just not how he thought it would be for him. Maybe there were things in him that needed to be challenged, and maybe there were rough edges in his heart that needed to be sanded down, and maybe he needed to learn how to love people that he didn't like, even other Christians. That was a big eye-opening thought for him. Even for people that were following Jesus. So he stayed, and at the end it changed him, and it changed them. And sometimes the best thing we can do to be salt isn't to run from what is hard, but it is to stay right in the situation we are in. So if our community or our society is going to be preserved, if it's ever going to be saved, it's not going to come by having some catchy Christian slogans or a feel-good church marketing plan. It's not that we need more T-shirts or anything like that. It's that we need more people willing to stay when things get uncomfortable. More people who will just show up even when they don't feel useful. People who will be willing to step into relationships that are difficult and conversations that are awkward and places that are unfamiliar, because salt doesn't work unless it gets in the world. When Jesus first said these words, "You are the salt of the earth," he wasn't talking to the religious elite, the super people, the super followers of God. He wasn't talking to educated theologians who had all the answers about God. He was talking to a bunch of young nobodies from the backwoods of Galilee, kids from nowhere. They had no influence. They had no credentials. They had no reputation even. They were nobodies. And here's the thing they've been sitting with. What if they believed him? Did they actually believe they were the ones who were going to preserve the world? Fast forward to the book of Acts, chapter 4. Peter has just delivered the sermon of his life, and he's standing before the most powerful religious leaders in Israel, and he's sweating because he's so nervous, because these are the elites. These are the highest echelon. These are the big, these guys can make or break your life and your career. And he's standing in front of them, and his respect for them, since he was a kid, had been to, you respect these men. He was so nervous. And he starts to tell them about Jesus. And how do these leaders respond? In 4 verse 13, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished and took note that these men had been with Jesus. Ordinary men, they had no degrees, they had no education, no platforms, and yet everyone in Jerusalem, they knew about these guys. The religious leaders were panicking, and they're starting to whisper to each other, what are we going to do with these guys? What are we going to do? I don't know if you see what's happening here. These nobodies became salt of the earth. Not because they were the smartest, not because they've been qualified and trained, because Jesus had declared it to be true, because they had simply shown up, because they simply stepped into places where they even felt threatened and useless, and it turned the world upside down. And Jesus says to you and me today, just a blanket statement, you are the salt of the earth. It's not a hope, it's not something to work at. Every one of us here, we are salt of the earth. You are a part of this movement. The only question is, do you believe it? That's the question you have to figure out for yourself. Do I believe it? And the answer to that question can blow your life up right there, if you actually ask it, if you actually try to answer it. And first of all, there's no wrong answers or perfect answers. There's just real ones. Jesus declared, you are the salt of the earth. And what do you think Jesus would say if he looked at us, and he does, and he sees us? Where in your life do you feel called to preserve something that matters? Is there a relationship? Is there a broken system that you're in? A forgotten place? Or where are you adding value in someone's life this week? Who? Whether at work or at school or in your family or in church, who are you going to add flavor to? And then there's the next question, which is, have you ever felt like you lost your saltiness? Because Jesus says that salt can lose its saltiness if it gets diluted. So the question you don't want to ask, what is diluting your spiritual life the most right now? What one step could you take this week to regain strength and focus? What one word describes where you are being called to be salt this week? If you were to come up with one word that you're like, I'm really feeling I've got to be salt, whether this person, that situation, whatever it is. If you could think of one word that would kind of encapsulate it, we don't have to understand it, but it makes sense to you, say that word. I'm going to end in prayer. God, give us confidence and boldness to be what it is you have already declared us to be. Salt. To see our lives as spiritual and to believe that showing up matters. To resist the temptation to run from the hard things. Also, God, help us to allow others to be salt in our lives. Fill us and use us.